welcome to the Energy Talk podcast. My name is Olubumi Olajide, and thank you so much for joining us again this week. This episode is going to be quite the interesting one because we're going to be talking about the role of oil and gas in the energy transition. I'm going to be speaking with Jim, who has a wealth of experience in the sector. After this episode is over, Jim has offered to do a Q&A session, and I think this is fantastic because he is going to be answering a lot of the questions that you might have listening to this episode. And I'm sure you will have questions. So just to give a quick preview to what this episode is about, I think it's just tell my personal story. So as many of you know, my background is in petroleum engineering, and although I started out in the industry, I made the decision to move out and to look for other ways that I could be part of the energy transition. It's been a difficult and unconventional path so far, but it's been extremely rewarding in different ways. But a lot of people are also in the same space where either they started out in the oil and gas industry or they're realizing that they need to be in different spaces, especially when you're young, you just got out of school. And I know personally a lot of people who graduated along with me are facing a lot of the same questions and trying to figure out where they can fit in. So this is something that is going to be very honest. Jim does a brilliant job at being honest with this topic, and I hope you appreciate that. And even if you disagree with a lot of stuff Jim says, then I challenge you to bring it up in the Q&A session. Leave your questions. We're going to have the link in the show notes of the episode. And yeah, it's going to be a very productive session. So Jim is going to introduce himself. He has... you hear for yourself, but he is very well qualified to talk about this topic. So I hope you enjoyed this one. I really do. And I'll see you on the Q&A. So yeah, let's hand off to Jim.
Yeah, I was in the oil and gas space, or have been around it for over 35 years. Right out of school, I went to work for Halliburton, and my background was finance and accounting. And so I moved to Oklahoma for a couple of years, and then I was transferred to Mexico City, and then I lived in Buenos Aires, moved back to Houston, continued in accounting, and then I moved over to Dubai and had responsibility for finance and accounting for Halliburton and for the Middle East and former Soviet Union. And then we moved to this organization of shared services, which was procurement, accounting, HR, IT, finance, security, HSE, really all the things the operations people don't want to mess with. That was my responsibility. And I did that in the Middle East and former Soviet Union. And then I moved back to Houston and took that over for the globe. Really enjoyed it. Ended up leaving Halliburton, and I went to work at Intercontinental Hotels Group, of all things, as Senior Vice President of Global Shared Services and Head of Central IT. Loved it, great company, but I was only there about a year. A friend of mine got some private equity money, and we bought a business out of Halliburton and created a company that was global. It was called Powerwell Services, and I was CFO, CIO, and we made 4 or 5 acquisitions and grew EBITDA from like 10 million to 90 million in 2 years and sold it. It was great. Had a great time. It was very intense. I encourage people, if you haven't done a startup, do it. I mean, it's really intense. Not sure I want to do it again, but it was really fun, and it was very successful. Took a year off and played golf, and then I got angry with my golf game and decided if I was going to be angry, I might as well go back to work and get paid again. And so I went into investment banking for about a year and a half. All my clients were oil and gas, was help them refinance their companies or sell their companies or strengthen their balance sheet. And then I had an opportunity to be CFO, CIO again, or join Statoil. I chose to join Statoil, which is a Norwegian-owned oil and gas company, large company, and spent 10 years there. I had 4 years in VP of HR assignments, and I spent 4.5 years implementing digital technologies. So I had responsibility for IT, for data management, for lean process, for management system, for data science, and as I said, overseeing digital projects. And after doing that for a while, I really enjoyed it, but it was really frustrating because the change, that type of change in the energy industry was difficult. And so I decided I wanted to influence the whole industry. I didn't want to just influence Equinor, and I figured out that the wall I was banging my head against was an industry wall. and really wanted to be involved in helping the industry get through digital transformation and really jumping into the 21st century. So I had exposure to a lot of the consulting firms, and I liked Bain the best. And when I was ready to leave, Bain had an opportunity for me to join, and it worked out perfectly. Bain's a very collaborative company, as you know from the conversations we've had. I'm a collaborative guy. I like the cooperation and the co-creation and the dialogue. So I've been with Bain now for about a year and a half, and I'm engaged with many different companies on many different topics and helping them realize that regardless of topic, whether it's operating model or sustainability, digital and data has to be a piece of it. We live in a digital society, and every industry is going to be part of it. Nobody's going to get a pass. So super excited about that. I think the opportunities in the energy space are so big, and energy transition, it's like you and I have talked about, it's not an energy switch, it's an energy transition. And how do we go through that in a good way? So, like I said, so that's been my career that's given me tremendous exposure to so many different areas of energy that it's really exciting. And on a side note, I'd like to share with the audience, one of the things I got to do, I got to mentor a team from Lagos, Nigeria, that was part of a global energy accelerator. And I was so impressed with the young people that I worked with in Lagos. Their task was to figure out how to provide sustainable energy to Congo. Now, granted, I was the mentor. I learned way more from them than they learned from me, I am certain. But I was so impressed about their curiosity and the way they approached it, both from fossil fuels, wind, hydro. It was super, super impressive. And I forgot to mention that to you, so I thought I'd mention it on our Zoom call today. But really curious. I think it was five young people from Lagos that were part of this. Really impressive. Really enjoyed that work.
That's a really great story, and it's quite surprising. We've spoken about 3 or 4 times now. That's the first time hearing about it. So I'm glad there's always new stuff that's coming up. And if it's not obvious already, today we're talking mainly about the future of the oil and gas industry and how it's going to play out in the future, and especially when it comes to the role of the job market and of young people in particular. So you spoke a bit about having technology play a role in the oil and gas industry, and that has been a huge conversation. I mentioned that it's been an industry wall to really address that particular issue. So now that you're at Bain and you speak with clients now, is it something that it's different, and how do people react to it? Do they see the more of the need for digitalization, and what are the factors really pushing that? Is it now about climate change? Is it about regulation? Is it about policy? What is really pushing the drive for technology in the oil and gas space?
You know, I could talk about this subject for 2 days, Olu, as you know. I think what's extremely interesting about it is, over the years that I've been doing it, it's moved from, I would say, the main emotion being fear and loss of jobs, and to now there's some companies that are extremely aggressive in implementing digital because they understand that it helps them make more money, and it keeps people out of harm's way, and it can protect the environment, right? So they're, in some companies that are very aggressive, they're implementing digital solutions. They're using AI, they're using robotic process automation, they're using digital twins, they're using connected worker, whether it's augmented reality or virtual reality. And then you have other companies that are just really into the curiosity phase and recognizing that they need to be more aggressive. The pandemic actually has been a great demonstrator of the power of digital, because all of these tools like Zoom or Teams or all the things we've invested in, they work. They freaking work. And so it's proven to the industry that these technologies work. And so I'm seeing more, what I would say is more curiosity and more willingness to spend money. The other thing I would say is 2 years ago and even pre-pandemic, the majority of people that I talk to about digital viewed digital as a separate thing. You had operations and you had HSE, and then you had this digital thing that was out to the side. And more, digital needs to be part of everything that you do, right? Because whether it has to do with protecting the environment, you can utilize digital to measure fugitive methane emissions or detect leaks, right? You can use digital and artificial intelligence to do predictive or preventive maintenance so that you only send people out to repair something when it's getting ready to fail. I also believe that, or what I see is, I think companies are recognizing it's no longer optional. And the biggest reason it's not an option anymore is because the people that are entering the workforce, they don't want to work in an analog way. Their whole life is digital. Their whole life is connected via their smartphone. So I think it's business value, safety value, environment value, and then just expectations of people entering the workforce are the things that are really pushing companies towards this recognition of, I have to be more digital. And I have to be more digital in my operations. I have to be more digital in our office. I have to be more digital in our culture. I actually have to be more digital in where and how people work from, because that's different in oil and gas, right? So I think there's multiple factors all pushing in this direction of digital's got to be part of the definition of who we are as an industry or as a company.
Something very interesting. The last company you worked at before you moved on to Bain was Statoil, which is now Equinor, and they've taken a lot of their deep offshore exploration and production for the oil wells that they usually produce to kind of leverage into another industry, which is developing offshore wind, and it's been a huge success because now they're one of the leaders in the sector. So, is this one of the examples they kind of point out about how technology and the transition is really pushing people to think differently in the industry?
Well, I think what Equinor's been on this journey towards renewables, there's no question about it. I would say it's still early. What I would say is, though, that Equinor's push into this space has been successful. It has been driven in many instances by their stakeholders. And it's the same holds true for all of these oil and gas players. Is the stakeholders of this world want to hear about net carbon zero. They want to hear about renewables. They want to hear about energy transition. They want to hear about, how the oil and gas can contribute to that. And what I would say is what we will see so far. Equinor has been partnering with BP, and BP is a big partner both in the UK and in New York. It was just announced. So what my expectation is that we're going to see the renewable space more defined by digital and new ways of working. Because what we can't afford to do in the renewable space is build an industry that scales with people. That's what we did in oil and gas, right? We built an industry that had to scale with people. And part of the challenge was we hire when the industry's good, and then fire when the industry went down, and hire and fire. And that's not sustainable. And I think the industry, the oil and gas industry, has recognized that. And that's part of the value of digital, is being able to scale up or scale down using technology and not people. I also believe one of the advantages of big oil and gas moving into renewables or wind like Equinor is doing is, for decades, we have managed capital and capital investment around the globe in some really challenging environments and with difficult stakeholders or challenging stakeholders, and managing major capital projects. And so the industry knows how to do that. As a whole, the industry knows how to manage major capital projects around the globe in difficult circumstances. And I think now when you combine that skill set with really going digital first, I think we're taking some good steps towards really having oil and gas participating in the energy transition. I think we shouldn't forget that a lot of the profits from some of these companies is still coming from oil and gas.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it is still these companies providing energy, but transitioning along the way from certainly oil and natural gas towards wind or towards solar and being part of that industry. I think the last thing I would say about that is I think we're going to see, in addition to the types of partnerships with Equinor and with BP, we're going to start seeing different and new commercial models. We already see some of this, partnerships with gas powered power plants and those types of partnerships, and then partnering around data and digital. And so I think, like I said, we're in the very early stages of oil and gas really transitioning into renewables. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being a fully mature journey, I'd say we're at 2. I'd say we've got a long way to go, which is actually very exciting, because what that means is tremendous opportunity, both for the oil and gas industry and for future partners and for the workforce that is just entering the energy space today.
That's actually interesting, because that also brings up a very decent level of uncertainty. And you mentioned earlier about a cultural shift. So you spent 35 years really going through almost all the sectors. And I say you really flowed along with where the transition was taking you. But how is it looking for right now? How is the workforce really adapting? Because you mentioned about the cyclical nature of the oil and gas industry that has been criticized heavily for in the past, which has been really tied down to how well the general oil industry is doing and how well the oil prices are. But right now, with young people coming into the industry and them looking at everything from a more broader point of view, they're looking at climate change, they're looking at job security, and they're looking at the importance of having technology integrated in their lives, as you mentioned. What role does the oil and gas industry play, and how is it going to keep adapting itself to meet these particularly unique challenges?
The first thing I want to say, and it was in the middle of what you were talking about, is job security. I think job security hinges on people's ability to continuously learn and upgrade their own skill set. Right. It's not, I mean, back in the day when I started working, there was this loyalty back and forth, and I'm going to stay with the same company for a long time. That's not, I mean, that's just not the case. And in today's world, and I actually think that's a good thing. I believe that, being a continuous learner and open to new experiences. If you listen to my career and all the places I moved and the many things I've done, it's been good for my career. It's been good for opportunities in my career. And the other thing I would say is it's a hell of a lot of fun to be learning and growing and adapting. And so in terms of job security, keep that on yourself is my message. Don't be dependent on a company or another person for your job security. Do a good job at what you do, continuously learn, continuously be curious, and you're not going to have any problem, right? And have a positive attitude. Nobody wants to work with a jerk, me included. Positive attitude is so key in being curious and learning from others and starting conversations wherever you are with, tell me about X, because you'll find people are very open to sharing the knowledge and what they've done. And I would also share with the audience, Ola, that along your journey, learning what you don't like is as important as learning what you like.
Definitely.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And because that's an important, you don't, if you get into something and you don't like it, go find something else. Right? So, but that's good learning. That's part of your learning journey. The other, so from obviously that's a hot topic for me, although you can tell when I get on a hot topic and stand on my soapbox. But as far as, oil and gas / energy industry and opportunities for people coming in the workforce, what I would say is that we're going to need oil and gas for a long while. And every single oil and gas company knows that we have to produce hydrocarbons in a more sustainable, lower carbon footprint way. And so that requires the best and brightest. That's what we need in this industry, is the very best and brightest across a multitude of competencies, whether it's reservoir engineering or civil or mechanical engineering, whether it's IT architects, data scientists, data engineers. There's just unlimited opportunity for helping our industry produce fossil fuels with a lower carbon footprint. At the same time, if you're going to work in one of the bigger ones, and we mentioned Equinor, I mentioned BP, I mentioned Total, Eni, Shell, Exxon, Chevron, everybody has got this path towards more sustainable, more renewable. They're just going at different paces. And so, you can join one of these companies, but I would do my homework, right? I would encourage the audience, do your homework and learn about the culture of these different companies, because they're all unique. And make sure that the culture that you're entering matches your culture and matches your character, because life's too short for you to sacrifice your character to go to work for a company that doesn't share your values, right? So that's super important, because the opportunity set across all of those companies is going to be very similar. So you could start out being part of digital transformation solely focused on a natural gas, and then that could move towards wind or a wind project, or it could move towards wind operations, right? Or it could move towards solar or battery or hydrogen, right? So even within one company, the opportunity to get exposed to so many different areas is impressive. I have a 19-year-old daughter, and I've talked to her about getting in the industry, and she has this view that the energy industry is dead. And that perception is so wrong. It is so wrong, because the energy industry has a lot of legs left. The oil and gas industry has a lot of legs left, and the oil and gas industry will be a key part of the transition. And I think the key word here is transition. It's not an energy switch. And so helping companies be resilient, you've got to connect. You've got to have interconnectivity of your operations excellence and how you do operations with a sustainability mindset and digital integrated into everything, and making sure that your corporate strategy and your operating model ties all that together. And so if you think about just how broad that is, for people entering the workforce, to me, it's never been a more exciting time to be part of the energy landscape. And that obviously to me includes oil and gas, and being part of this transition towards more renewable and more sustainable way of producing it.
Something very interesting that you mentioned, I just want to highlight in a very different way, is about influencing change. So I'm guessing a lot of what you do currently with Bain is trying to influence organizations to make the operations better, and just to generally be an organization that aligns closely with what the actual goals are. But when it comes to young people that don't have this breadth of experience, and they don't have what you traditionally need to actually influence people and influence large organizations, because a lot of young people, particularly in the energy space, they found the most effective way has been to protest, and that has led to like massive climate protests. But there's this temptation to get locked in, and that is the only way to actually make change. And the slow process of influencing change, as you mentioned, as you just talked about, trying to go into organization and have the understanding that this is something that's going to require a lot of work and a lot of smart people, that is turning out to be a lot more of an unpopular approach to this. So I just want to hear you talk about influence, especially how young people could actually influence all these changes and all these transitions that they are going to be actively involved in.
That is a really, really, really great question and comment, Olo, because there's a lot of truth in that. I'm always a believer it's better to change things from the inside out. And So it goes back a little bit to my comment on culture, right? There are many companies whose culture is to be very empowering to the people at the front line that are actually the ones doing the work, that are making the money, enabling things to happen. And more companies are working in what we call an agile way, which is multidiscipline teams, where teams are empowered. And so, from my perspective, although I encourage all the people entering the workforce, again, do your homework on culture, because, I can't tell you the number of companies I've talked to that have given me examples of people new into the workforce that have delivered outcomes that just blew them away, that were so far beyond what was expected. And the reason is that people entering the workforce, they have less life experiences. They don't know what they don't know. And so that they're able to deliver things in a way that is more sustainable and actually more digital. And the thing is, again, it's a big culture thing, and it's also about you be you. If you're going to change things, you need to be genuine, and you need to be in a company that allows you to be genuinely you. Now, if you're a jerk, you can't be genuinely you, because you're not going to influence anything, because people aren't going to want to work with you. But if you're positive and curious and solutions oriented and are willing to take on different tasks and different challenges, man, the opportunities that are going to present themselves are tremendous. And if you get into a company where you have great ideas and you're trying to implement them and you're just not getting any traction, go find another company where you can get traction, right? And companies will listen to you. Now, the other thing I will say is, and this is really hard, even for me, I say it, but I'm not good at it, is sometimes you have to be patient and persistent, right? Because, and that's true with any company. It doesn't matter the size, it doesn't matter the complexity. It does take time for an individual to build up credibility and to build up a reputation of, wow, this is impressive. Or so, just because you delivered something one time and it was received good or bad, it's going to take more than that. So be patient, be persistent, be positive, be solutions oriented, be forward leaning, don't be negative, don't be a jerk, and always be in the mode of listening, communicating, being curious. Now, if you want to stand outside and throw rocks, you can. There's a ton of people that are outside throwing rocks today, and that's okay. I would prefer the best and brightest of you to not throw rocks, but come join us.
That is a very powerful message that you just ended up with, and that is something that I have learned quite a lot. I think it was a slow learning process for me, especially because I realized that you can either complain about the way things are, but when you actually dig down to the details and realize why things can't change as fast as you want them to, and you realize all the details and you see all the work that goes into it, you have to make a decision at that point that, do I want to be part of the people solving this problem, or do I just want to take the easy route? For me, it seems like the easy route, and just complain about it, because you have to be working actively towards a solution to actually have that credibility, as Jim mentioned. And I think that's also something that's extremely important. So we have a program that kind of addresses this. But before we go into that, I just wanted to give your final outlook about what the future of the oil and gas industry is, particularly pertaining to the skills people need to develop and the role of young people and the transition globally as well.
Well, I think I've talked about it a little. I am very bullish on the oil and gas industry as part of the energy transition, both from a fossil fuels perspective and then transitioning into renewable. So I'm bullish. I'm bullish. I think sometimes as an industry we're apologetic and we're not as forward leaning as I think we should be on the opportunities that exist for young people. So very bullish. I think the opportunities for young people to come in or people early in their career to come in and have impact against multiple opportunities across multiple geographies is real. I think it's real, and I think it's going to continue to grow. And then what I would say is do your homework. You know, if you're hearing people talk about the industry being dead, do your homework. Read all you can. Read all the articles you can about energy transition and the length of time it's going to take us to move away from fossil fuels, the challenges that we're going to have in reducing the carbon footprint to net zero by 2050. Learn about that. Don't read one Twitter account or don't read one Instagram message and believe it. Do your homework. And that would be a super key message. That's do your homework on the industry, do your homework on the challenge, do your homework on energy transition versus energy switch. I've never heard energy switch in my life. Energy transition. Do your homework on the cultures of these companies and what fits you best. Prepare yourself from a learning perspective, from an attitude perspective, from a curiosity perspective, and then get after it and come join us, right? Like I said, the best and brightest, we need you. We need you in this space. We need you on this journey, and we'd rather have you inside working with us than outside throwing rocks.
That is actually perfect. And as somebody who lives and breathes these particular topics, I know personally that even though you do research on your own, you're going to have a ton of questions. And you'll be excited to hear that Jim has offered, along with some other of his colleagues at Bain, to answer a lot of your questions. So after this episode goes up, we'll be organizing a Q&A session where you can ask all your questions about careers and energy, particularly to Jim and his friends, along with Bain, and it's going to be a fantastic experience. So, Jim, I just want you to talk about that and how powerful, because you gave the story earlier about mentoring the group of young people from Lagos and how important it is for people to have somebody to bounce off their ideas and confusions off, and how that really makes you develop your own personal ideas and reflect it onto what the real world realities are.
Well, I think that part of the reasons that attracted me to this podcast was, you know, the demographics of your audience. And, you know, I can imagine if I was in their shoes, the number of questions I would have about everything I hear about energy transition. And, you know, what I can tell you is every country looks different. Norway is far advanced in energy transition. Why? Well, because 98% of their power is hydro. So it's really easy for them to talk about energy transition and, you know, how far advanced they are. But if you take a country like Tanzania, who's just found a lot of gas, or Mozambique, same way, or some other of the African nations that are just finding oil and gas, they're in a really different position. And so, you know, it's a country by country, community by community dialogue that we need to have. And man, I would love the ability to have an audience of leaders that I could ask questions about. And as we discussed, I'm going to do my best to get, once we get the questions in, to get people, based on the groupings of questions, to get people involved in answering those questions for the audience. Because if I can answer all of them, then we won't need to get anyone else. But I don't think I will be able to. So I'm really encouraging the audience to send your questions, send your comments, challenge the things I've said today. I'm open to a dialogue about it. I don't believe I know everything, but I certainly have my opinions. So I want this to become something that is interactive, where we can create a space between people entering the workforce and people that have been there and people that understand the challenges we face, and see if we can't have an ongoing dialogue, that we build something that goes off and on for a long time.
Thank you so much for joining us this week. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And as Jim said, we are going forward with the Q&A session, and we're going to make a lot of different ways for you to submit your questions. So at the very top of the show notes, you're going to see a link to a Google form document where you can just give us your name, where you're from, and what question you have. And if that doesn't work well for you, also drop our email in there, or you can just DM me directly on LinkedIn or Instagram and Twitter pages. This is a really great opportunity, trust me, to ask somebody like Jim about everything you want to know about careers and energy, and also about the energy transition. So please don't pass this up. Be confident in your questions and don't be shy about anything you want to know. So, as Jim says in his own words,
Thank you, Olo. It was a pleasure, and I look forward to the Q&A. Come on, guys, ask me some hard questions.
so I look forward to seeing all of you guys on the next episode and very soon for the Q&A. And as always, have a lovely day. Bye bye now.